Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Digital Marketing Scoop. Joining us this week, I believe, all the way from California. Am I right, Neal?
California, baby.
All the way from California, Neal Schaffer. Neal, very welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm pumped to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you would, Neal, just tell everyone a bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. Well, I am a digital marketing author, speaker, consultant based in California. I actually have an Ireland connection because every year I fly to Dublin to teach at the Irish Management Institute in Sandyford. Haven't been this year, but yeah, I've been doing that for the last few years. I also teach at the Rutgers Business School here, consult a lot of companies. Well, I did a lot of physical speaking until coronavirus, so it's a lot more virtual speaking. And I've written a few books. The latest is called The Age of Influence, which just published in March of this year and is really, all the different things we can do in digital marketing. I believe that influencer marketing, the way that I redefine digital influence, is or has the most compelling potential for businesses today.
That leads very nicely on. Our previous podcast was about basically why brands should start the podcast. And Pamela was listening to one of yours.
One of the episodes was why I'm doing 100 podcasts.
Yeah.
I thought that was very funny to lead with.
And the one that I recorded yesterday that should publish tomorrow is the What, Why, and How of Podcasting. My webinar that I'm going to be on right after this podcast is done is about podcasting as well.
And my recommendation for brand.
So all in sync here. It's great.
So basically what you're doing is you're going on 100 podcasts, presumably all kind of in the marketing space. Obviously providing value, but obviously as a benefit from providing that value as well, you're promoting your book, The Age of Influence. If you would just tell a little about the book, kind of your goal with it and what you kind of hope people get out of it.
Yeah, and let me just start by saying that I'm not just going on random podcasts for the sake of, going on podcasts, right? We all have to be strategic with what we do. And that decision to really go full force into podcasting actually came from a conversation with my publisher. How do I get people to talk about the book, to promote the book? And she said, I said, should I do traditional media outreach? She said, well, it's really not as effective as it used to be, as you can imagine. And she said, we recommend you contact bloggers and podcasters. And as I talked about in that episode that I published, the only medium, there's only 4 content mediums in digital, right? It's either text, which is blog, video, YouTube, photo, which is Instagram, and really any other social network. And then you have audio, which is podcast. Of all those mediums, the only one where it's completely normal to interview people is the podcast. You don't have many popular YouTube channels based on interviews. Not every blog is an interview. And it would be really weird over photo just to do a static, someone holding my book saying, awesome book. So that, got me deeper. And I'm a podcaster myself. I just recorded podcast number 179. I've been doing it since 2013. Took a few years off, which is why the number isn't there. But since Q4 last year, I've really been getting more into it as well. And I came to the realization as I was writing my book that, dang, podcasters are influencers too, and brands can build influence through podcasting as well. So that was one of my tactics. One of my strategies was I'm going to try to get on as many relevant marketing podcasts that would have me, because I know I'm going to get the word out to a new community of those listeners. And I just said, whatever you do in marketing, got to have a KPI, right? I'm like, look, if I can record 100, if I can be in 100 different podcasts, wouldn't that be awesome, right? So that's the KPI. And I've just, I was looking at my spreadsheet today. I'm already on like 78 published. So on my way.
Amazing.
So yeah, so that's the thing about the podcasting. So the book is really about, like I said, it's about influencer marketing, but it's not just about the Kim Kardashian, Instagram having 1 million followers. It's really realizing that today, if you're publishing content consistently on social media, you have some influence. So 10 years ago, there were very, very few people that had a lot of influence. Now, a lot more people have, maybe lesser influence, but it's still significant influence. And what I mean by this is, the influencer marketing industry will say, well, how many followers do you have on Instagram? And even they have declared that if you have at least 1,000 followers, you are a nano influencer. So I take that concept and I say, look at your employees, look at your fans, your customers, your partners. How many of the people that already like, know, and trust your business have at least 1,000 followers on any given social network? And I think you begin to see that there are a lot of people around you that have influence. So instead of reaching out to people that don't know you, that are just in it for the money, where it's going to be a one-time transaction and where it's going to look like an advertisement, why don't you work with the people that already love your business, right? Where it's not going to look transactional. When they represent you, it's going to be authentic, and it's going to help incite the word of mouth that social media today does not incite unless you pay for the privilege. So you have the redefining of digital influence to allow any business to tap into it. You have the fact that all these trends are pushing social media to become a pure pay to play for businesses, and advertisements don't go viral on social media, right? And then you have this other concept, which I also talk about, which is influencers are content creators. So don't think of them just for amplifying your message. Think of them as being people that you could create. You can have them create content for you, right? In fact, you could source all of your content. And this is where podcasts come in, because every time you invite an influencer onto a podcast, you're influencer marketing, right? But it's in that content creation piece, right? It's, blog posts, webinars, photos, videos, whatever it is. That's a really, really powerful way to get your fans involved. And obviously, they're probably going to share that work with their fans without you even having to ask them to, but you're going to get a lot better content than if you try to create it yourself. So the book's about influencer marketing, but I cover all these different concepts and really what I think are best practices today based on just the landscape that we live in digital marketing.
I'll stop there.
One really interesting point you touched on earlier as well was, the four aspects to digital marketing. Your written, your video, your pictures, and your audio. I think the fantastic thing with like what we're doing here with a podcast is from this one piece of content we're about to create, we have all of those covered. You can transcribe your podcast. We're filming it. It's an audio podcast, obviously.
Yeah, we can take a picture.
And Dave can take some nice photos of us to use on social media. So from one, and I think that's because for most small, medium businesses, the problem is time. They don't have time. But if you can set aside, half an hour a week to talk with a customer, to talk with someone, a brand expert, somebody in your industry, someone who can potentially help your target audience, your customers, you can create so much content from that 130 minutes.
Yeah.
Can I share my screen really quickly? You can put this on video. I'm totally okay with it.
For audio, this is the point where we're going to promote our YouTube channel for people listening.
Okay,
and our social media channel.
It says the host disabled attendee screen sharing. If it's really easy to do, and you can edit out this part later, but
no, we keep it in for fun.
Yeah, but since you're shooting video, I think this would be really interesting because you're talking about something that I am actually, like I said, I'm doing this webinar and you speak to the points that, let's see if it works now. Perfect. Okay. So I'll just share this really quickly and then I'll turn it off. Okay. Hopefully you can see my screen, but yes, this is exactly the 2 points that I make as well, is that podcasts help you create relationships, right? And the influencers, as you said, if there are people that are influencers in your industry and you reach out to them, they may not be interested in you. But if you say you want to interview them for your podcast, and as your podcast begins to yield more influence, it becomes a magnet for actually attracting, influencers in your industry. But don't stop there, because if there are potential clients, potential partners, executives at your customers, you can include them as well, right? With a podcast. A lot of people just get really excited about the opportunity to be interviewed on a podcast. It's very different than a blog interview, and a lot of people don't want to show up in video. And obviously, you create relationships with your listeners over time. And this is something that you don't want to forget, because these people are investing 20, 30, 45 minutes a week into listening to you. There's no other content medium like that. The blog post, what's average time spent on site? A minute, 2 minute, 3 minute, maybe 5 minute. I don't know many sites that get more than 10 minutes, right? Unless you're Facebook, obviously. How long do you spend watching a YouTube video? Even over 5 or 10 minutes, it's a pretty long investment of time. When you're on social media, looking at a photo on Instagram, instantaneous, but the podcast keeps you on there longer. And I just want to say, I agree 100% with this fact that podcast chatter, you are speaking my language.
Amazing.
You have that's why I'm like, oh my God, I have to show this to you. It's really top fresh mind, but it's the blog post. It's if you shoot the video of the interview, you can use that. You can use snippets for social, and you can begin to put these things together for lead magnets. So, all right, I'll stop there. But yeah, I agree 100% with what you're saying. I just had to show you that.
That's fantastic. Actually, just on your slide there, you had lead magnet. So we're constantly preaching about repurposing content. Lead magnets is not something I've actually probably talked about much in this podcast. Maybe go into how you use the podcasting platform as a lead magnet.
Well, so I'm assuming the audience understands the concept of a lead magnet, correct?
Well, just in case, let's start there.
Okay, well, let's start there. So the idea is, look, if you look at your funnel, right, you have your website, and probably above your website, you have social media, or this could also be your podcast. You're at the end of the day, you're trying to bring people back to your website. Once they get to your website, how do you convert them? Not everybody's going to go immediately to the shopping cart. Not everybody's going to go immediately to the contact us form. So the idea of a lead magnet is it's something which brings them a little bit closer into your world. And the way you do this is you offer something of value in exchange for an email address, which then you put into a marketing automation funnel. So not everybody sees your content every day on social. They don't visit your website every day. If they come from Google search, they're in, they find the information, they're out. But if somehow we can get them to convert, not necessarily on business, but through a lead magnet, if we can get them on our email list, we have the ability to stay top of mind, send them emails on a more frequent basis, and hopefully deliver value and over time begin to build a relationship with that person over email. So that's really the concept. So a lead magnet, I think a lot of people think of lead magnets for B2B companies, ebooks, white papers, webinars, basically anything you can get an email address for. But for B2C companies, it works as well. Hey, sign up for our program, get 10% off your first order. It's the same concept. Sign up, we're doing a free event or, free consultation. These are all getting your information so that they can stay in touch with you, regardless of if, what happens to TikTok or Instagram Reels or any of that really, right? Or Google, you own it. It's an asset together with your website. So the idea of now taking that lead magnet concept, in order to create a lead magnet, especially for B2B, you need to have content of really, imagine if you were able to have 10 leading experts from your industry on your podcast over 10 weeks. Why wouldn't you? I mean, I'm assuming you repurpose that in the blog post, but why wouldn't you repurpose that into a lead magnet, like an ebook, the top 10 industry influencers predictions for the future, right? That's a really, really good content that I think a lot of people would be interested in. And it's so valuable enough that you could put it in a PDF format, stick it up on your site for download and collect email addresses.
Yeah.
So that's
It's
a fantastic
really-
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really because a podcast, I think a 20-minute podcast, I think it's about 2,000 words per 10 minutes. That's been my calculation. My blog posts are usually 2,000 words. So if I decide to repurpose a blog post that's 20 minutes, I think I can get 2 good blog posts out of it, right? So there's a lot of content. If you're doing 30-minute interviews over the course of 10 weeks, that's a lot of content that you can pick and choose from and you could completely create lead magnets from these. And hey, the influencers, there's a chance that they may want to share them as well because they like the content. They feel proud that they're part of it. And that's where you really tap into the heart of influencer marketing is, you want them to share your content with their community. And by doing it in this way, it allows them to do it. I mean, hopefully they would share the podcast episode, but perhaps the ebook, one of 10 industry influencers featured, that would give them even more, more reason, more incentive to actually share your content with their audience.
I think that's actually a really nice podcast tip as well for having a guest on. If you ask them either during the podcast or after it, all the same question, and then put that together as a video, as a lead magnet, as an ebook, you could get so much out of that. Actually, that's a really nice. It's definitely something I think we might actually implement.
We're going to go do that
Yeah.
Hey, Q4 is right around the corner. So, if you ask over 10 episodes in Q4, then you come out with an ebook in January of predictions for the year. You're all set.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, brilliant idea.
There's so many content ideas from this episode. It's brilliant.
Yeah, I know. But that's what we were saying as well. Like every guest that we have on, we learn from them as well as our listeners learning. We learn,
Yeah,
It's brilliant.
100%.
And I know people that start podcasts just to learn, just as a networking vehicle.
But
Yeah.
it
There's a
absolutely
gentleman-
is. Yeah.
Yeah, a gentleman named Douglas Burdett. He has the book. Is it called the Book Marketing Podcast? Anyway, it's the biggest podcast that talks about or marketing book podcast. The biggest podcast that talks about marketing books. He is an influencer, right? And he just started it because he wanted to learn, and he thought the best way to learn would be to interview other authors on a podcast, right?
Yeah.
And I think, and that's see, when we think about influence, that's what builds influence. It's a passion, so you continue to do it.
Yeah.
So what, pick a content medium. If you have someone in your company that's really into podcasts, I mean, launch your own by all means, but you got to continue doing it. You got to be passionate about it. And that's why people tend to become influencers more than businesses, right? But that's the challenge. I think businesses can do it. You have the resources, you have the content, you have the people, but you got to have the passion, and you got to be able to stick with it, because success doesn't happen overnight in any of this.
It's a very good point, because we said it in the last episode about podcasts as well. I think I should have looked up the study in between episodes, but I'm sure that most podcasts end at like episode 3 or 4 or something. They only go a very small amount anyway.
Yeah.
And it is a combination of things. I think it's two things. One, like you said, the passion isn't there. And I think two, people are, if they don't see success, this goes with everything in life, if they don't see success quickly with it, they stop it. Yeah. But that's a very good point. If you're passionate about it, you'll keep plugging away, keep interviewing. And the great thing as well is, it's enjoyable. Like this conversation, if you have a brand and you're able to interview customers, interview people, you can make it a really enjoyable experience.
Yeah.
It's just, this doesn't feel like work.
No, it doesn't.
I agree.
I feel like I'm at the coffee shop, just, chit-chatting with you.
Exactly, yeah. So Neal, could you tell us a bit about maximizing your social media for businesses in particular? So you talk about influencers, but what about businesses trying to maximize their social media accounts?
That's a great question. So this is my 4th book, The Age of Influence, which published 2020. Before that, my 3rd book was called Maximize Your Social, and that published in 2013. And I wrote that book because companies, and even today, I believe it's still relevant, because companies are sort of confused or spinning a lot of cycles, not understanding how to be more effective at social media. So I think, number one, you don't need to be everywhere. Okay. I've worked with clients where I go on their website and they have like 8 different social media icons, but they're really not participating in any of them. Okay. That is not the right strategy. So I think it really, in 2020, 2021, I think it becomes really clear, first of all, are you B2B or B2C? So if you're B2B, LinkedIn is the absolute no-brainer. Even for B2C, LinkedIn can be really, really powerful. I train, real estate professionals, insurance salespeople on LinkedIn, because that's where a very wealthy demographic is, right? The executive demographic. So for lucrative B2C, LinkedIn might be, interesting as well. Facebook for B2C is a no-brainer. Although if it is a younger audience you're targeting, Instagram becomes the gorilla. I mean, they could be used together. I know that in Europe, Pinterest is not as popular. In the United States, it still has a good degree of popularity. If you're targeting a female demographic with an e-commerce product, then Pinterest is something that you should consider as well. Twitter is, I consider Twitter more B2B than B2C. It could really be used either way. So I would see companies with B2B doing LinkedIn and Twitter, perhaps LinkedIn and Facebook, depending on, their audience. But those are probably going to be, so when I see a B2B say, Neal, what do I do with Instagram Reels? What do I do with TikTok? I say, forget it. And yes, if you're targeting a very young demographic, TikTok is great, right? We're talking junior high school, college. That's going to change over time. But, I see Snapchat and TikTok going after pretty much the same really, really young market. And everybody that I know on TikTok has an Instagram account anyway. So, and obviously we have Instagram Reels. So, now today it's really, really clear as to what you do. But here's the thing. Remember when I talked about those content mediums, right? So your main content medium is probably going to be blog, video, or podcast. I don't know how many companies have photos like Flickr. I mean, when it existed, like Flickr is our main site for social media. It just doesn't happen. And at the end of the day, we don't own our social media. It's owned by the Zuckerbergs and, and the Trumps and whoever in the world. So,
I hope not.
Yeah, I know, right? It's just, it's so ludicrous. It's anyway. And if I'm an American thinking this, I know you in Europe are, Anyway, but you need to take a step back and go, okay, remember the funnel, right? We got to get people back to the website. So you need to be thinking of social media as a secondary, not a primary. And I think so many companies try to make social the primary. And you're at a disadvantage because social was made for people, not for businesses, right? Yep. As a paid media, it can be very powerful without a doubt. As an organic media, my suggestion now, which is very different than when I wrote the book back in 2013, but based on my suggestion in the age of influence, is don't look at social media necessarily. Yes, it's a place to market, right? You can do your paid media, what have you. If you have organic content, you should be sharing it there. But if you think of social media more as a collaboration platform rather than a marketing platform, I think you're going to be a lot more better. And you're going to have a lot more effective marketing, because this is where you begin to see relationships in social media as part of your influencer marketing, of connecting with influencers, of connecting with customers, with your followers. And in doing so, generating user-generated content, generating word of mouth. And through that, I think you're going to be a lot more effective than doing the traditional, okay, we got Hootsuite, we're going to do 5 posts a week on Facebook and 7 on LinkedIn. I know we all do that as marketers. We have to do it, right? And we have to promote our content. So I get that. But the way the algorithms work, we're never going to be able to beat out that passionate dancer who's doing Instagram Reels, or, someone celebrating the birth of a new baby on Facebook, or someone that just got a promotion on LinkedIn. I mean, it's hard to compete against people, the authenticity, the emotions. So look at social media, primarily pay to play, share what you have organically, but I am recommending my clients to shift to a 100% user generated content on social media as quick as possible. I think that is going to be your best bet for having long-term success. That combination of using social for influencer with a combination of paid media spend on social where it makes sense. That's my recommendation today. So I see all of this. It's funny that you asked, because I'm currently starting to write my next book. And it's about this concept of to be successful in digital today. It requires a little bit of everything, right? It requires a little bit of influencer marketing, requires a little bit of content, requires a little bit of social, requires a little bit of SEO, requires a little bit of email marketing, right? It requires a little bit of all these things to meet the digital consumer of today. But don't go down the rabbit hole of just focusing on one of them, because at the end of the day, you need to be good. You need to be good enough, or to be dangerous at all of them. But you need to be able to concoct. I mean, the best way I can put it is the best recipe of all these different ingredients for your brand. And I think a lot of companies just focus way too much on that social piece, and their focus is often misspent in promotion, broadcast, rather than truly building relationships.
In terms of the user-generated content, could you give an example of a brand? If you can't name a brand, if they're a client or whatever, there's no problem. But just an example of how a business can go about that. Obviously, we've kind of discussed the podcast route as one way of potentially doing that.
The user-generated content is going to be much easier to do with B2C, and it's going to be much easier to do with photographic content. I will. That is the disclaimer there, right? So for that. Even one of my favorites is Maersk, the shipping line, and I had the opportunity to interview the head of their social media program. 5-6 years ago, they were winning digital marketing awards in Europe, right? A shipping line, and their Instagram content 100% user generated content. And you use a hashtag. If you use the hashtag, they'll reach out to you. Can we use your photo? There might be some legalese. And if, I was looking at their photos the other day, they had a video of a sailor. It turns out he's one of their employees, and he's a nano influencer. He also has a YouTube channel, right? So these are examples of how employees can be leveraged as well. So that's the easiest thing, is to get people talking about you, seed the market with product. When you're B2B a little bit differently, I think it's more of stories about your employees, stories about your customers. Evernote has a blog where they interview their customers. And they interview them not just about how they use Evernote, but about productivity hacks in general. And I think that's a great idea of, once again, including influencers as part of your content creation. It's not 100%. It's not user generated content the way we think of Instagram photos, but at least you can include them in your
in the
content.
process.
Yeah.
And you're not just talking about you. You're not just talking about your company. You're not just talking about your products. And you're not just talking about your product features. You're creating user-centric content by focusing on the user. And I think that's really that term user-generated. It's user-centric, focused on the user experience rather than what you want to say as a marketer. And
Yeah,
that's
'cause
the key
people
shift
believe
that I think
people,
has to happen.
you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Right now, I'm not talking about what my company does. You two aren't talking about what your company does. This is an example of it's not user generated content. In some ways it is, because I guess I'm a user, but it's user centric content, right?
Yeah.
It's focusing
Yeah.
on the problems that your audience has and what are possible solutions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like definitely for, when you think of things like fashion brands, I mean, literally their entire
Oh,
strategy
yeah.
could be user generated content.
Yeah.
But that's very
It should
interesting,
be.
like a shipping line.
I know.
how they go. I'm totally, first thing I do after we get off here is I'm going onto Merck's Instagram page.
Yeah, we have to look that up. Yeah.
there you go.
You know, my favorite is Disneyland. When Disneyland launched their Instagram account back in 2013, and it's documented. I have a link in Maximize Your Social for the article, but they said, look, we cannot compete with the authenticity and the creativity of people that come to Disneyland every day. So we're not going to compete with them. We're going to celebrate them. And every single post that we publish on our Instagram will be from one of our fans. And
Brilliant.
Ritz-Carlton hotels, you'd think that these really high-end brands, they want complete control over the brand, 100% user-generated content as well. So I don't know why every brand doesn't do this. But that if I was B2C, I would absolutely be doing it. I have clients that just stop posting organically because it's not effective. They do paid. So now we're trying to get them working with influencers. And now when you get to the nano influencers, right, these are people that don't necessarily want money. They'll do things for product. And I have case studies, in my book, and I published a blog post about like 18 case studies that didn't make my book. And there's like a flavored water company, and they just shipped 1 month's supply of this flavored water to a bunch of influencers, and they doubled their online sales over the course of a few months. So, it doesn't necessarily have to cost money. And when people have your product, they can create content that incites the word of mouth. That's the key thing. That's why with my own book, The Influencer Marketing, yes, I do podcasts, but I'm also reaching out to university professors who teach marketing, saying, hey, this you may want to consider this book for your curriculum in the future, and seeding them with the book, right? To get people at universities, the professor, talking about my book, because otherwise it's not going to happen. I can try to display an ad. It's going to be expensive. A few people are going to click on it. It's just not the same, right?
Yeah.
So, you need to spend money to make money, but that spend money, when you think of shipping product or sending free product, you can get a lot more out of that than I think a lot of companies think. And it kills me. Maybe the two of you have this experience as well. I have companies, because I talk a lot about marketing technology and marketing tools. Hey, Neal, we'd love to give you a 30-day free trial if you'll talk about us. It's like, why wouldn't you give me a lifetime free trial? Why would you give me the same? Why would you give an influencer the same free trial that anybody else can get if they go to your website? What are you trying to do here, right? So, you need to treat. There's one gentleman who wanted to be on my podcast. This is like yesterday, and he was offended that I wouldn't have him. And I had to say, what you think my podcast is for and what I think is for are different. I would never want to burn bridges with an influencer. I'd say I totally get that we're a mismatch. Maybe in the future, our roads may cross. I mean, you don't want to make influencers mad at you, right?
Yeah.
So when companies like do this outreach to bloggers and influencers and podcasters, they just use this cut and paste template. And it really makes a lot of influencers mad. I block people if they do that stuff to me. I use a tool called SaneBox, and they have something called the Sane black hole. And if I put your email in that black hole, you will never be able to get into my inbox again, so long as I have the tool. And I find myself having to do this every day with unreasonable people who make demands that they don't treat content creators as influencers. So if there's one thing you get out of this podcast, among many things, but when you see that nano influencer, right, that the podcaster, the content creator, those are the top 1% of internet users. Only 1% of internet users are truly creating content on a regular basis. So you want to treat them, their royalty. You want to treat them with the respect. Even if you don't work together for whatever reason, you're not going to burn bridges. You're still hopefully going to be friends. You're still going to support them to the day when you may be able to work together. But the worst thing you can do is out of the gate, send that automated email, offend a lot of people, and you're never going to make any progress working with influencers. It's really going to affect you negatively over time. So just remember those things. Influencers are people, right? But they're content creators. They can talk about you positively. They can talk about you negatively.
That is true. Yeah.
Neal, that was brilliant. Thank you very much. That was fantastic.
Oh, you're very welcome. I had fun.
Brilliant.
Yeah, we just do.
If people listening would like to find out a bit more about you, where's the best place for them to head?
Sure. So, well, my name is Neal Schaffer. So I am nealschaffer.com, Neal Schaffer everywhere on social media. That's the real Neal, Neal. And the last name Schaffer is Schaffer. I also obviously have the book, The Age of Influence, which you can find on Amazon anywhere in the world. And I have my own podcast. If you are, well, you're probably a podcast listener if you're listening to this. It's called the Maximize Your Social Influence podcast, if you want to go a little bit deeper into this concept of digital influence.
Brilliant. Neal Schaffer, thank you very much.
Hey, thank you.